Welcome to our Beyond 20 campaign, a celebration of One Joshua Group's 20 years of service excellence. This is a One Joshua Group production, providing access to information and experts to help improve quality of life and health outcomes.
Thank you for joining us. One Joshua Group is celebrating our 20th anniversary, and today we're joined by a very distinguished individual who's been with us along that journey. We're so excited that Dr. Clyde W. Yancy has agreed to join us. And just a little background on Dr. Yancy. He is Vice Dean of Diversity and Inclusion, and he's also Professor of Medicine and the chief of the Division of Cardiology at Northwestern University in the School of Medicine. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Yancy.
Mr. Payne, I couldn't be happier. I have seen the incredible rise in significance and impact for One Joshua Productions, and of course, I've had a professional affiliation with you for over 20 years. So I celebrate your success. I celebrate the success of your enterprise, and I'm really delighted to have this conversation with you today.
And thank you again, Dr. Yancy, for that. In our research, I want to be sure that our viewing audience got these last few tidbits of information. So Dr. Yancy played the saxophone with Southern University's marching band at the Sugar Bowl. Now, that's a very, very important activity. And I think he may have been in high school then. He was so influenced that he went to Southern to get his undergraduate degree and then on to Tulane to medical school. And in some of the other activities where Dr. Yancy has showed us how incredible he is also past president of the American Heart Association, where he received the esteemed Chairman's Award from the American Heart Association. He's been recognized within the top 1% of cited scientific authors in the world, and he's also a member of the National Academy of Medicine. Now, that's who Dr. Yancy is professionally and is on paper. Wanted to let you hear what Dr. Yancy's patients say about him.
I like the time he took with us and explained our current situation. He sat and got to know us first, which was unexpected and made you feel very comfortable.
Dr. Yancy has a wonderful bedside manner. Not only is he a very good doctor, he doesn't care what your status is. He appears to treat everyone the same. I hope most doctors in the near future can take a tip from Dr. Yancy's playbook.
Dr. Clyde Yancey's care is the highest quality. I could not ask for a better experience, particularly given the severity of my life threatening cardiac journey resulting from COVID 19. I resoundingly recommend Dr. Yancey and feel especially privileged to have him as my cardiologist, whom collaborated with and led the extraordinary cardiac team that saved my life.
Dr. Yancy is the best combination of clinical excellence, kindness, and compassion. He remembers details about our lives that shows my wife and I are real people to him, not just another patient. I trust him completely with my life and feel he's sincerely interested in keeping me healthy while respecting my need for a good quality of life. Dr. Yancy is unusually courteous and the quintessential gentleman.
So, Dr. Yancy, our discussion with you today is the importance of servant leadership. So, that's what your patients say about you. Statistically, when we did our research, there were hundreds of reviews. All of the reviews rated you at 5. It doesn't get any better than that. And when we listen to what your patients say about you, they talk about you being caring, about you being trusting. And we believe that that embodies the philosophy of servant leadership and how we meet people where they are. Why do you think servant leadership is so important?
Well, first, I am awed and humbled by those articulated testimonies. Um, I don't seek those kinds of testimonies. It is a function of the way in which we approach patients and practice medicine, and it is a testament to things that started many, many years ago to experience that kind of gratitude, that kind of expression. It really is interesting that the introduction took us back to my days in Scotlandville, Louisiana. If anything, the whole ethos of servant leadership began in a very small, segregated community in the late 1950s through the 60s and 70s. I went to Southern University because that's the only place I could afford. They had an opportunity, offered me a scholarship, two scholarships, music and academics, and I picked academics and stepped away from music. But it was that foundational experience of having a strong Black mother, faith based, and living in a community surrounded by people who saw something in one small child and thought if we can get this child through the usual maze of everything that was extant at that time, segregation, very limited means, difficult access to most goods and services, if we can get this one child through, perhaps there's something that he will offer to our community or even beyond our community that would make a difference. I came out of that experience with an overwhelming sense of two forces. The first force is gratitude, but the second force is really sourced biblically. To whom much is given, much is required.
Mm-hmm.
Never able to remove that impetus from my mindset. In fact, it's with me as we speak today. And so those two incredible forces plus a mother's love led to the trioka of guidance that launched a journey that's now imminent as we discuss today. But it really began with a mother's love. From my point of view, a mother's love like no mother's love. It was sourced from a faith-based perspective that one has to recognize that what we receive is only valuable if we give something more in return. And a lot of gratitude for an incredible number of people who really thought this one time, let's see if we can shepherd somebody from this childhood experience to a very different adult experience. And to this day, I hold so many people in great gratitude. To this day, everything I do, not a day passes that I don't make a reflection about my mother's influence. And every day, I do a calculus to decide, have I dutifully given back in regards to the gifts that I received?
Mm-hmm.
So that really is the foundation of my experience with servant leadership. There's a lot more I can say about servant leadership, but I would be short-sighted and remiss if I didn't acknowledge how it all got
Mm-hmm.
sourced.
So we thank you for that. And I remember, Dr. Yancy, when we first met, the very, very first time that we met, and we were actually in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I don't know if you recall the particular incident as you talk about duty. There was a gentleman there who had a crisis moment, and you moved with all the svelte agility to attend to this person. It wasn't a patient, it was a person. And I wondered, who is this man? And I later found out that it was Clyde Yancey. And I watched you and listened to you attend to him with the same duty. But when I had a conversation to speak to you one on one, there was no sense of the difference in the person who attended to that individual in crisis than us having a discussion about how beautiful it was to be in the Virgin Islands on that day. Those things are not lost on people. Certainly, they're not lost on your patients. have they talked about the importance of caring and being concerned about them. And when we look and see your area of work, why did you decide cardiology was your calling?
I spend a lot of time visiting with young professionals, students, physicians in training, talking about the arc of evolution in one's professional journey. And I always describe that the majority of your journey is determined by the extent of your preparation, the presence of opportunity, and this one single phenomenon of serendipity. And if it turns out that the right forces come together and you're prepared to receive those forces and act on those forces, you end up going in a good direction.
Mm-hmm.
I started with just this wildly excitable mindset about science in general. When everybody else wanted a baseball or basketball for Christmas, I wanted a chemistry set. And I made it to college really early and started just indulging in every dimension of science I could, up to and including working in an organic chemistry lab just to learn as much as I could and make some extra money. But then I discovered cardiovascular physiology as a freshman at Southern. And I thought then that that was the coolest set of actions and reactions I could ever envision. And guess what? Decades later, it's still the coolest set of actions and interactions it could be. But as a freshman in college, you can't do a lot with that except saying you're fascinated. But then as time evolved, that continued fascination became very diligent study. And that very diligent study prepared me to go to some of the very best places to attend medical school and then receive my first training. And that alignment then of preparation and interest followed this serendipitous path that ended up as a cardiovascular specialist. That's been my journey, and I think it's similar to everyone else's journey. Very few of us can architect the journey. There is not a blueprint. The only thing that works on the journey is preparedness, availability, and opportunity. If we can think that through and dismiss the notion that you can craft exactly which direction it's going to go, you'll have a lot more fun along the way and probably experience much more success.
So, Dr. Yancey, in this mode of caring and listening and realizing that sometimes we can be cruel and do good. My grandmother always told me that right's not always right. So sometimes I think we can be cruel and still do good. On the personality, the behavioral component, what are the qualities of someone who takes a servant leader approach to make a difference?
This may be the most important conversation for us to host for the next few minutes because servant leadership is a euphemism that attempts to capture a lot of different domains and is often used to describe leaders almost glibly. And I think that's a disservice.
Mm-hmm.
Servant leadership really is about several important phenomena. The first one is the most important. It's selflessness. When one can get to a point where the outcome, as it's interpreted by others, is more important for the person with whom you're working than for self, then you know you're on the right path. As long as there is a component of doing something to receive personal acclaim or personal reward, it's not exactly the same as selflessness. The other thing that's very interesting about being a servant leader is the second part, leader.
Mm.
You have to be willing to embrace power. Now, many people bristle when we talk about power because of the power dynamics about which many of us are aware. But in truth, power, when applied for good reason, does allow us to accomplish the greater good. But if you have a selflessness approach, an intent to do good for others, and you are empowered with the authority or the resources or both, then it's amazing what can happen. But it starts with some transition where you think less about self and personal gain and more about helping others, this notion of selflessness. And one can only source selflessness from life experiences. Those life experiences, either because you've seen suffering, those life experiences because you've heard plaintive cries of people in need, those life experiences because people that are important to you have served as role models to show you what caring looks and feels
Mm-hmm.
like. And early on, you recognize that it is a much better sensation to support another, to give to another, than to receive for self. And as that early sort of experience becomes more deeply embedded, becomes informed with new experiences, becomes populated again with opportunity, you recognize that there is something that is inspiring and inspired about helping another human. I mean, why do you do something like medicine? I have spent so many hours away from family. I have said no to so many fun opportunities. I have put myself in harm's way so many times. Why do you do this? There's so many other things you can do with intellect, with energy, with opportunity. You do this because you care. That's the short version.
Mm-hmm.
You do this because you care. And somewhere along the road, you learn what it meant to care because somebody cared for you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very important consideration. And when you recognize how that enabled you to get to your next level, then you give it back.
Well, we commend you on that. And in our current events and probably many of those to come, this kind of leadership offers people hope. In the comments that we read from your patients when they said that Dr. Yancy listened, and the patient said in one of the comments that he made my wife comfortable. Now, he was the patient, but the fact that you were able to reach to his wife to make him comfortable certainly probably made him a better patient because he then was able to eliminate
Maybe a better husband.
right a better husband too to eliminate some of those other kind of stressors, if you would. And
But let me just give you pause for a moment
mhm,
and share with you that it is a truism. Every new patient experience starts in the following manner. Hello, my name is. I've reviewed your records and I have a fairly good sense of the cardiovascular circumstances that we need to address. But before we begin in that role, I'd really like to know something about you. So give me a 2 or 3 sentence biography. Tell me something about you as a person, not as a patient, as a person. Where you were born, what's your education, what's been your work profile, who are the important people in your life. Just give me some sense of who you are as a person. I must say, Kermit, I have experienced every expression in the office from laughter to tears.
mhm,
Words like, no one's ever wanted to know anything about me. Or why would you care about me? I'm just this fill in the blank. And it's been the most remarkable experience to sit down and listen. Here's a little tip for healthcare providers. The time it takes to sit and listen to someone is just incrementally more than the time it takes to rush through,
mhm,
get the electronic health record addressed, and move on to the next person. Just a few extra minutes. It's not an extra half hour, but to sit and really listen, pens down, eyes engaged, and understand who the person is in front of you. And guess what? Fighting all the stereotypes in medicine. When you listen, it's remarkable what kind of journeys people have
mhm,
experienced, what kind of contributions they've made to life and living, what kind of special experiences they hold true, they hold deeply. And when you understand that, you have a much better sense of how to approach someone, how to engage in dialogue, how to construct a plan. It's remarkable to just sit and listen. There is such power in listening. And my patients have told me stories, that are inspiring, that are frankly awesome, and some that are truly awful. But no matter what the story is, it generates a response, an emotion, a thought, an idea. And it's been the experience that I wouldn't trade for anything else. It really has been, for me, my expression of the doctor patient relationship. And it's more the human human relationship. And I particularly enjoy it.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. I was thinking about this. I shadowed a mentor of yours and mine, Elijah Saunders, on a couple of occasions. And he would follow something similar to what you said. He'd do his introduction. And I remember once he asked a patient, "Would you believe I play the violin?" And the patient said, "You do what?" And he said, "Yo, yeah, I play the violin." And then he went forward to get the patient history and to find out. But at the end of that conversation, it was he was able, Dr. Saunders, but he was Dr. Saunders, was able to get to the end of why the patient was there, and certainly to be able to help his outcome. So it is those kind of attributes. And Dr. Yancey, you actually touched on our next question. You'd answer that for us. And that is, how does this kind of communications approach help to improve health outcomes? And if you want to speak more broadly to that, I think you've addressed that, substantially. But if you'd like to expand on that, we'd certainly like to hear that.
Kermit, I have a unique experience. I'm deeply, deeply invested in discovery science. I am amongst those that are determined to be leaders in American medicine. I have a strong commitment to medical education. Well, now, why do I start my response with that? The end game, the ultimate goal here is for a patient to have a relief of suffering or a better life and living experience, qualified as better quality of life, living longer even perhaps. But we are committed, every single interaction, we're committed to do something that changes the arc of that person's health and healthcare experience, changes the arc in a good direction. When you think about that in totality, yes, a big part of that is discovery, knowing what to do. Yes, a big part of that is education, teaching others what to do. And a big part of that is putting systems together as a leader that create more efficient ways to receive care. But ultimately, the intersection of all of those forces with a human being has to be contextual. There has to be some understanding of that person's life and living circumstances. There has to be a process of cultivating, building, and validating trust. There has to be a deep moment of respect. And so that you're able to convey, I'm listening, and I sincerely want you to get better. I sincerely want you to understand the circumstances, and I sincerely want to help you, even if you are facing a mortal illness. I want you to at least have clarity of understanding why the illness is as it is, and even at this point in time, what the options are. So you've got to have this communication piece, you've got to have the understanding piece, and you've got to build trust. None of our discoveries will matter if a patient doesn't hold you as trustworthy. None of our education is worthwhile if the patient can't experience or won't experience what you've taught someone else to do. So easily over half of what needs to happen is appreciating the context of the patient. If you really want to be successful, if you want to check all the boxes, that's different. But if you really want to be successful and see patients thrive, then this is what you need to do. And the one thing about patients thriving now is that it's very different today than when I entered medicine. I've been in medicine 41 years. In the beginning, Thrive was a little bit of a handhold. Now we have so many tools. We can genuinely and without any equivocation help the majority of our patients do substantially better than ever before. We truly can help patients feel and do better. And so it's very important that we're able to convey the information and really execute the best care plan possible.
So now we're going to talk about your day job. So let's talk a minute about heart failure, heart transplantation, how we are going to address those issues in populations that don't take advantage of this new technology and discovery. And what can we do better, Dr. Yancy, about getting people into care? Not treatment necessarily, but care.
So the best answer to that question is to change the frame. We've tried for so many years to have meaningful interventions on the far end, the back end, the long tail of the disease process, and particularly in communities that are challenged, communities that may be identified as being minority, communities where the social determinants of health are really adverse. We have to think about upstream interventions more so now than ever before. We have to think about fundamentally preventing some of the risk. How do we prevent obesity? How do we identify high blood pressure early on and intervene when it's easier to treat and when the years of exposure won't lead to strokes and kidney disease, dialysis, and heart failure? We have to understand how we think about nutrition. I love this concept, food is medicine. We should not give up on the communities that are at risk and just think about their downstream consequences in treating their heart failure, their kidney failure, their strokes. This is 2023. We should think about preserving organ systems and preventing disease and extending the arc of the healthy life. And I think there's no better community for that application than the communities that you and I visit so often. Yes, we do need to find a way to get evidence-based, proven to be beneficial therapies deployed equitably across the board. There's no question about that. A lot of that gets into public health policy. But the real passion, the real advocacy is how do we change the burden of disease to begin with? I learned an important lesson 12 years ago, advocating on behalf of the American Heart Association about strategies to preserve health through the lifespan. First time we started talking about this, 2010, 2011. And I was struck when an editor of a periodical that was very popular in the African American community said, Dr. Yancy, this story makes a lot of sense to you and to me, but to the people that you're engaging, their lives are not the lives where extending out for a long period of time is a calculus that makes sense to them. They want the here and now. They're struggling right now. They want you to talk to them about how can you relieve the burden of disease. For you to talk to them about living an extra 7, 10, or 12 years, some of them think that's hell, and that's not what they want to do. That's a terrible testimony, but it's a true testimony. And it just endorses how important it is to shift the frame. Let's not think about the downstream stuff. That's what we have to tactically and mechanically execute. But if we want to do something that is really inspired, move upstream. And when I mean upstream, I mean even with our children, and start early on, embedding the important lifestyle issues in their mindset. And oh, by the way, the quality of your health is almost always driven by the quality of your economics. Education is so key. I mean, that's a difference maker. There's this much difference. And for those that can't see me, I'm holding up about an inch space between my thumb and forefinger. There's this much difference between me and the guys I grew up with who didn't end up doing what I'm doing. This much difference. And that space is covered by education, by love and my own stubbornness and will to keep moving. But there's this much difference. And so it's got to go upstream, Kermit. It's got to go upstream.
So we so greatly appreciate that. And Dr. Clyde Yancy, who is the Vice Dean of Diversity and Inclusion and also Professor of Medicine and Chief of Division of Cardiology at Northwestern University School of Medicine, indeed a servant leader, not to forget that he played the saxophone at Southern University's marching band in the Sugar
The
Bowl.
human jukebox.
In the Sugar
human
Bowl.
jukebox.
Right. So I just to say,
you know, late at night, I still look at YouTube videos of the human jukebox. Boy, those guys can rock.
They did. But I just want to say to you and to those people who've joined us, you've heard the words of a esteemed and renowned cardiologist but you've also heard the heart of a man who is a servant leader. And we so gratefully appreciate the work that he continues to do, and want to give him the opportunity to give us his last words and this is an audio video podcast, Dr. Yancy, so they could see the minuscule difference that educational attainment can make in leading us to better economic stability, to improve health outcomes, and certainly address the issues of equity. So we appreciate you adding that. Lastly, what would you like to say to our viewing audience?
Nothing will ever take the place of effort and work. There's no easy way. Easy does not apply to people with my acculturation, my background. There's always space. In fact, there's always the necessity to say thank you. You will get so much further ahead by saying thank you than by stepping around and through and over people. And never, ever forget the people in your world that have done something for you, to help you, to support you. The one thing that no one can ever take away from us is the love we receive from our loved ones, the love we return to our loved ones. That is precious, that is inviolate, and that is necessary. So it's got to be about working hard. Enter whatever space you're going with a sense of gratitude, collegiality, and never, ever forget about the people you love and the people who love you. Hard not to be successful with that.
So, Dr. Yancy, thank you so very much. And thank each of you for joining us in our celebration of our 20th anniversary and beyond. And Dr. Yancy, Clyde, we certainly appreciate the journey that you've taken with us over the 20 years. We look forward to those other 20 years that we will be mindful and remember what the servant leadership said. Continue to watch our podcast. Again, thank you, Dr. Yancy, and thank each of you for joining us for our celebration.
This edition of Beyond 20 is a Life Beat podcast sponsored by One Joshua Group, your strategic source of engagement to improve life through better health, education, and information. For more information, visit us at theonejoshuagroup.com or follow our work on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter using hashtag OneJGCollabs. One Joshua Group, building capacity, expanding resources, joining what you know with what we've learned.